Hi, how are you?
All good, all good. How about you?
I'm doing great.
That's
Doing
great to
great.
Hey,
hear.
Mikey.
Just waking up from a nap.
I'm
Awesome.
jealous. I do need some naps.
It says that
Alrighty.
we're live.
Hi, how
Yep,
are you?
yep, we're live. Awesome. So, well, welcome to today's class. It's gonna be on uh, fundamental techniques for rock and metal, right?
All
Yes,
right.
So,
rhythm specifically.
yep,
Rhythm specifically. It's funny because we guitar players obsess about lead, and we talk and we practice hours and hours and hours of picking techniques and scales and scale this and 3 note per string patterns that, and it turns out 80% of the time we're playing rhythm and we're not putting enough thought into that. So I thought it would be a cool session to have today, and I brought my 7 string just to play some chugs today, and so that we're gonna discuss a little bit of everything, how to get a good tight tone for anywhere between classic rock and the heaviest of metals and everything in between, and how to dial your tone for good rhythm, which is trickier than you would expect, and just overall good practices about rock guitar rhythms. All right.
that's awesome. I'm gonna add myself to the distortion team as well today. But before we get started, I just wanted to invite you guys, both here on the Zoom, which is just Mikey for now, and people on the YouTube stream, to join the academy if you're interested into that. This is the kind of stuff we do every day over here on the academy. We have conversations every day with instructors, students. We talked about a lot of topics. So, in case you're considering this is the right fit for your guitar journey, please consider applying. I just left you both on the YouTube chat as well as the Zoom chat the link for you to apply. That's in order for you to have a conversation with us and just to see if this is the right fit for you. So we'll be very, very glad to talk with you guys. With that in mind, let's begin. So Manuel, with what do you want to start?
Well, I think we should talk about right hand technique because that's the foundation for everything rhythm related. Okay, so um, right hand for rock and metal is, you know, a lot of this is based on contrasts. And when I mention contrast, what I'm talking about is the difference between the open strings and the muted strings. Okay, a lot of good rhythms and good riffs are created this way, specifically more for metal, but also for rock as well. So what we're gonna try to discuss today is how to achieve a clean technique from the right hand so we can get a good and tight sound. Okay, so we're gonna start with that first. So let's talk about muting and picking and right hand position in general. Right, so I'm gonna close up my camera here so you can see. Right, so with the right hand, you need to be careful not to over mute when you're placing your right hand. Okay, so a big deal of getting a tight rhythm is making sure that you get the right muted sound out of the down picks, especially. Right? So the right and the sweet spot for muting is where your string meets the bridge of the guitar. So that's where you're gonna place your hand for muting. So the further head or closer to the neck you put your hand, the more muting you're gonna get. Now there's a sweet spot for this. Okay, so if you start from a completely open sixth string, and you slowly, while you downpick, you slowly pull your hand closer to the neck, it's gonna get progressively more muted. Now, this is not something that you would like in a song. There's like no sound whatsoever. Now, the sweet spot is right here on top of the bridge. In my case, I'm using a Floyd Rose guitar. It's kind of a big bridge. It's kind of clunky if you never used it, but any bridge will do. Just make sure you're putting your hand right where the string meets the saddle of the bridge. So right there is when you're gonna get the sound of the note, but the sound is gonna be more pluck instead of an open string. Like so, this will be a completely open E. keeps on ringing, but if I put my hand on top of it, we get the E note, but it's like deadened a little bit. You can also do with power chords, by the way, if you mute multiple strings. All right, so that's the basic of muting. You want to use this side of the hand, right? With the right side of your right hand, if you're right-handed, of course. Okay, and you're gonna gently put it on top of the strings. Do not apply pressure over the strings, because that, again, you're gonna detune your guitar and you're gonna overmute, and those you don't want either of those things. All right, so that will be the basics of muting, right? And with rock rhythm, you're gonna alternate a lot between muted and open strings. Okay, so that's one of the cornerstones of rock and metal rhythm. This contrast that I was talking about a few minutes earlier between open and muted is gonna be one of the pillars of tight road rhythm. So you're gonna do, usually, typically, we're talking about single note muted and open power chords. So mute, open. Take, for instance, Enter Sandman by Metallica. It starts with an open riff, and then it changes into a bunch of muted power chords. So this sounds tighter than the open strings. Okay, so this difference between the open and muted is essential for getting a good tight tone, right?
100%. So I would just add, it would be cool if you're starting to practice this kind of techniques to alternate between muting your strings with your palm and opening up your strings. So let's think of, I don't know, this is a big guitar, so it's kind of funny to sit right here, but think of, for example, Tornado of Souls by Megadeth. Right, there are chords being strummed, and then a little bit of palm muting. Right? Palm muting, open chords. So it would be a good idea to practice alternating between palm muting and just regular strumming, for instance. This is an extremely common strumming pattern for metal and for rock. So explaining it real fast, it's all downstrokes initially. So we start with an open chord, then 2 muted downstrokes. So 1, 1, 2. That makes it a pattern of 3. 1, 2, 3. Then we repeat the same pattern. So 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. And lastly, 1 open and 1 muted. That makes it a total of 8 downstrokes. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. That's a funny pattern to play around. You can play around with it over just a single power chord, or maybe you can build chord progressions out of that, just improvising something. You see, I kept the same pattern over and over. I just changed power chords, and that's already a power chord progression on its own. So that's a cool technique to explore, both muting in general and also muting in the context of a chord progression, and to mix it around with open strumming. So that's one of the things I wanted to mention here. Another one is also, it's a good idea to play around with muting different strings with your palm. At least the way I approach my technique, when I mute the low E, I have a different hand positioning than if I mute the G string. Let me just try to get this out of the way so you can get a clearer picture. If I mute this one, I need to adjust my hand differently, or my wrist over here, than if I mute the G string. Could you see how I moved my hand like this? So yeah, I mean, I could do this, but it's a little bit difficult, and this one is maybe too muted. So if I readjust it, I have a little bit of extra sustain. So what I mean with this is, maybe if you have learned or know a song that has some string skipping on it, it would be a cool idea to explore that string skipping and readjusting your hand placement. The first one I can think of right off the bat is Message in a Bottle by the Police. Like, it requires these big steps. I'm starting on the A string and then I go up until the G string. So I need to readjust my hand a little bit every time I do these little string skips. So yeah, that's another comment I had. Maybe it's a cool idea to explore what's your hand positioning. It's gonna change. It's very subjective, so also just try it out and try to find what's comfortable for you. Yeah, I had these little two ideas so far. Also, Manuel mentioned this a moment ago, and it's how supported or far away is your hand on the strings. So that has a lot to do with how much sustain there will be on your note. If your hand is too far away, like on the bridge, it's gonna be basically open. So we have infinite sustain. Not infinite, but it's very long. If our hand is too over the string, it's gonna be muted. So that's something you can also play around. Maybe you can play around with how much or little sustain you want or need for a specific context. So play around with that with your horizontal hand placement. Yeah, that's what I have to add so far. Also, welcome Colin. He just joined the chat over here in Zoom. With that in mind, guys, I just wanted to also invite you to participate in the class. In case you have any questions or comments, please let us know on the chat, or if you're on the Zoom meeting, open the mic or raise your hand. We're very happy to talk with you guys. And yeah, with that in mind, let us know if you have any questions so far. If not, we can continue. So, Manuel, do you have something else in mind on this topic, or another idea?
I wanted to expand a little bit, just comment on the hand position, and essentially what you want to do, especially for those who want to build some speed when you're playing rhythm. The thing you mentioned about the hand position and the muting, this is super important because you cannot do everything with the wrist. So that's when the arm and the elbow and everything else comes into play. So typically the wrist is going to be in charge of the alternate picking, right? Or if you're downstroking, and that motion usually comes from wrist. Okay, so you cannot expect the wrist to do this and also change the strings. That's just too much for one body part. So that is why you're gonna adjust. You're gonna do this hand adjustment. This also works for leads as well, but super useful for keeping your muting under control, which is important when we discuss distortion and tone in a second. Muting is essential, otherwise it becomes really messy if you don't mute your strings, because it tends to resonate a lot. But yeah, so that's in terms of right hand technique, good muting, and a big difference between the muted and non-muted, especially for heavier genres. The heavier you get, the tighter you want to play, essentially. And like if you listen to just side note on you playing Tornado of Souls on a hollow body, that's like hilarious, and it proves the point that if you're heavy enough, any guitar will be heavy metal.
But I had long hair and everything, so metal never left my body.
Right. But for heavier rhythms, rhythm tighten and the tone also being tight, it's a big part of the sound of the genre. Like especially if you listen to the old Metallica sounds, like for example, if you listen to the old Master of Puppets recordings, right? If you listen to the main riff, da 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 da, it's super dry. It's like it's like absolute silence. There is no reverb, there is no anything, there is no noise. It's like super dry, right? So that kind of like super tight rhythm is essential for tighter thrash metal, heavy metal. Like if you're into that kind of 80s metal vibe, that's super important, right?
Yep, adding a little bit on that, I also consider important to work on downstrokes. Like a lot of that kind of metal is just this motion. So it could be a cool idea. Yep.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Go ahead. So, difference between downstrokes and upstrokes. And this has been a struggle for me because I was never able to play Master of Puppets all with downstrokes, just like James Hetfield does. It's just a great recipe for tinnitus for me. So all my life I played it with alternate picking, but it just doesn't sound as well. Why doesn't it sound as well?
Yeah, I was just thinking of that. Again, Tornado of Souls. Look, this is Tornado of Souls with alternate strumming versus same thing, but just downstrokes. Versus I have no clue why it sounds so different, but yeah, downstrokes is a huge part of that genre. So maybe working that motion. It's hard. I can't play Master of Puppets as well as at that speed. I never could. Haven't practiced it. But that riff, I'm alternating. James Hetfield played it, or Kirk. I don't know. I don't know. They're just insane. So it could be cool to practice just that motion as well on your practice when you're learning a song. Because on this genre, it's gonna be huge.
Yes, and I can explain you why. So it's less noticeable with stuff like you can kind of wing it with alternate picking, but with power chords it's kind of impossible because you're typically playing at least 2 notes. Okay, and the problem is on the downstroke you're gonna hit, let's say, an E power chord. You're gonna hit the 6th string and the 5th string on that order. In that order, if you downstroke. On the upstroke, you're gonna hit it on the other way. So even if you play it super fast, and I spent a good deal of time on this, it doesn't sound the same. It just doesn't. Especially when you're trying to play it fast. That's alternate picking, right? Compared to it's just more powerful because each strum is the same. Da 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 da. It's like a like a machine gun thing. I don't know. I have no idea. It's very static. It's very repetitive. It's very similar, which is part of the sound, part of the style. If you're a classic blues kind of person, this might not be your cup of tea. But for rock and metal, specifically for metal, it's important. Like classic rock, if you think about, I don't know, Zeppelin, Purple, there is some of that. If you listen, for example, let's say Highway Star, for example. So you have this kind of downstroke element, but the sound is different, right? It's not as clean and as tight as heavy metal is. So there is a tonal difference between classic rock and heavy metal that's happening there, stylistic differences. But the techniques are very similar. Okay, probably less heavy-handed, more kind of vintage tone versus like the super modern kind of. There's like some elements of that is on the gear that they used to use, like humbucker guitars versus single coil. In the specific case of Deep Purple, like Richie Blackmore used to play with Strats. Strats are very hunky, single coils, right, with old school Marshalls versus humbuckers and big ass Mesa Boogies on Metallica's side. That's a whole world of difference in terms of tone, and that plays a big part. But also how aggressive you are with your picking, right? You can do it gently, or you can do you can go really aggressive with your right hand, and that's also a stylistic choice.
Yep, also, I think another huge aspect of this genre and to get like that kind of tone we hear on the recordings is strength on your right hand. We need to be very aggressive. This is absolutely open to discussion, but that's at least my take on playing a lot of rock and metal, and it's strumming real hard changes the tone. It's different to just hit the strings real hard like that versus gently, right? It's just different when you play a riff very aggressively. I was thinking of a riff by a band called Royal Blood. This is called Out of the Black, and let me just hear it real quick. Yeah, so it's in drop D. No. Versus going softer. Like if you go very, very strong on your right hand, it just rings out differently. The strings kind of bounce versus the fretboard. It gets a specific kind of crunchy sound. Not crunch as in distortion, but just that vibration of the strings gives the sound of the guitar another character. So that could be something to take into account as well. Thinking of another riff No One Knows by the Queens of the Stone Age. Versus. Right? If we go very, very hard on our right hand, it just gets a different character. So that's also something I would encourage you guys to explore, like just being very, very aggressive. And I think the music itself asks for it because it usually sounds very aggressive. So that's another take I had. With that in mind, guys, so far, are there any questions or comments? Please let us know. Also, I just wanted to invite you again and to remind you that if you're liking this kind of classes we do over here at the GuitarZoom Academy, please consider joining. Just left you the links on the Zoom and the YouTube chat. We do this kind of stuff every day. Yeah, tell me.
Juan, what is the GuitarZoom Academy?
The GuitarZoom Academy, that's a great question. How would you define the GuitarZoom Academy?
Well, the GuitarZoom Academy is the best place to be if you enjoy playing guitar and learning guitar, right? We are a great community of like-minded people that love music and love talking, sleeping about guitar and dreaming about guitar all day. We have a great selection of instructors, all headed by Steve Stine himself. So if you like what you're seeing today, we do this every day at the Academy, Monday through Saturdays. Not Sundays because sometimes we sleep, we had to. But every other day we are here to answer your questions and get your goals fulfilled. So if you like what you're seeing today, just follow the application and get on board.
Definitely. And adding a little bit on that, we focus a lot on having a very personalized assessment for each one of your processes. We do a deeper dive into your goals, interests, strengths, weaknesses, and we take all of that into account to develop a very customized path for you. And we're checking on you constantly to make sure that you're achieving those goals and being as effective as you can with your time. So yeah, again, if that's something you think might be a good fit for your guitar journey, please consider talking with us and diving deeper into what we do. Also, yeah, us as the instructors have a very wide variety of styles, both musical and teaching wise. So yeah, it's always there's always a lot of room for learning with each one of us. So yeah, it would be cool to see you guys there. So I just left you the link in case you're interested into applying. With that in mind, if there are no other questions with what we have covered so far, let's move on. So
absolutely.
Yep.
Before we move on, for the people watching on YouTube, the link is on the description at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm also leaving it on the chat of the live stream just in case. And yeah, before we move on, I just wanted to add on that comment on having those short kind of notes, such as Master of Puppets, like right, that really muted sound. I would also encourage you guys to play around with the sustain of your notes. So if you're playing a riff or a power chord or a note or anything, play around with how long are you pressing your note, because if you cut it too short, you get this staccato sound, which might be something you might want. For instance, again, coming back to that, actually, this song I just played called Out of the Black by Royal Blood, it starts like this. Can you see how I'm muting this low D string so it doesn't ring out? Initially it starts like that. And then they explode and leave that open. So it's a very cool contrast from to. Can you see how just muting or not a string changes the whole riff? It's the same notes. So I would encourage you also guys to maybe listen for that on the songs you like or are learning, and also try it out on your practice. It's a very different feel you get from the muted notes to the long notes. So that's my last comment there. Let's move on.
Right. Related to that, there is a very common rhythm/songwriting thing that happens a lot in rock and metal. I was just remembering about Enter Sandman. There's a number of songs that do this kind of build up in their songs, that they start very kind of arpeggio or clean even, and then they build up, and then they end up playing like an open string riff. And if you remember, well, Enter Sandman is one of them, but if you remember AC/DC's Hell Bells, it starts with like, starts with a very nice arpeggio, and then it goes like very in the face kind of open string, and like that is the contrast that I was talking about at the beginning of today's session. It's all about the contrast. Like it's very much in the face. Like all the heavy rock, classic rock is right here. It's like the wall of Marshalls in your face, and they're slapping you with riffs, and that's at least the way I like to look at those riffs. Like for example, Rock You Like a Hurricane, like so. Oh, sorry. So it's a very simple corporation, nothing but power chords, but there's something about the rhythm, there's something about the way it's played, it's so powerful. It's one of those all-time classic leads, rhythm section, sorry. Well, one of the comments I'm getting on YouTube, talking about parts of rhythm chords. In terms of chord selection for classic rock, is usually power chords. That's most of the chord selection that you're gonna say. In some instances, you're gonna get more complex chords, but it's usually, typically, 2 notes. Why is that? Because with distortion it gets messy. Now clean tones, it's different. Like you were mentioning, like A Message in a Bottle. That's less distorted, so you can get into like arpeggios kind of land. But for hard rock, classic rock, heavy metal, it's typically power chords, and that's it. The originality from the rhythms comes more from the contrast, the dynamics, and the rhythm itself, right? Staccato versus legato, and just the sheer brutality of the riff itself. Like for example, there is one great song by Metallica, which is Holier Than Thou. It starts with like it's like that for a minute, and there's a whole build-up happening in the rest of the song, and it's just an E power chord. There's not too much to talk about that rhythm progression. It's just one chord, one power chord. It's more the beauty of rock and metal comes from the arrangements itself, rather than super complex corporations with seventh chords or like other stuff that you would see on other genres. What do you think about that one?
Yep, I agree on that. Classic rock and metal uses a lot of power chords. Going into the more modern side of things, they start to add a little bit of harmony, but they are very careful with the voicings because, as Manuel said, distortion makes things messy. Like all of that ringing at those little resonances and the frequencies really make everything very messy. So, for instance, I'm thinking of, this is called Arlandria by the Foo Fighters. This is still like too high gain. On these instances, I like to use less gain, so it's not as dirty. Too dark. Yep. Better. And I'm muting. If I were playing this like very open, it should sound, or it could sound a little bit messier. I think it still sounds good, but yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of frequencies going on over there. So yeah, people start to be very careful with their voicings when they... Sorry. Well, I'll tune this in a sec, but it starts to be messy when they add a lot of notes over here. So it's rare to see like a whole bar chord when people are using distortion because it gets very messy. With that in mind, there are a lot of instances where actually there's a full chord sounding, but instead of strumming the whole thing, you just see arpeggios. For instance, one I can think of is called Trust Fall by Incubus. I can't play it up to speed right now, it's very hard, but... Sorry. I would even turn my gain even lower, so it's a little bit more prettier. So.
You know what? I was just about to suggest the volume rolling when you need more clarity.
Yep, right now all of my knobs are this close to zero, so we still get that crunch. As you can see, I'm leaving the notes ringing, so we still get a lot of resonance there, but I'm not strumming, right? I'm playing single notes. So yeah, as you can see, they're full chords, just not strummed, because that sounds very different. Also, yeah, that's like my take on full chords and more complex voicings. On alternative rock, it also happens that people just play single notes. So I'm thinking of... Right? They just reinforce a specific riff without worrying too much about the whole harmony, because it might be reflected on any other instrument on the arrangement. So yeah, in alternative rock, it's huge to play just single notes and just to support maybe the roots of the bass or something like very monophonic is the word. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of unison in rhythm. Like it's part of that wall of sound kind of thing, and it gets it even gets more exacerbated for heavy metal. It's just the bass is doing the note, the guitar is doing the note. If there's a keyboard, it's also doing the note. So they're always like piling on that single note to get extra power. And usually the kick drum follows the riff sometimes. So it's just it's as much in the face as possible. And again, it's just a creative choice from the genre.
Yep.
Okay.
Also, just thinking again of Tornado of Souls, that's a very cool song. They do thirds, so this kind of intervals. If I leave them ringing, it sounds very messy, but they're very short on the song. That's it. That happens a lot on Megadeth. It happens on Holy Wars as well. I don't remember the riff, but I know there are some thirds like this. If they are played on the same instrument, it sounds very messy. But if they are not left ringing out, it just sounds cool. It's a very cool contrast from just single notes or power chords to add thirds as an interval. So yeah, that's something to take into account as well. Also, Reptilia by The Strokes. These are thirds. This is basically a bar chord, but instead of playing the whole thing, they just play the root and the third. Sorry. So yeah, chords appear with distortion a lot. It's just taking a look at the specific era we're considering, because it changes depending on the context. Yeah,
right.
That's what I have.
No, that's those are all great examples. Actually, if you go way back, if you listen to Hendrix, and I'm particularly remembering about Purple Haze, if you listen to his tone, like he's playing full chords. He doesn't give a damn about all of this that we're talking about. He's like going like, and on top of that, his sound from that era was like a fuzz pedal and a cranked up Marshall, so it was as messy as it could get. Imagine like a 100-watt like Lexi going like in your face, like as loud as it can get. And that creates like a very saturated tone. But again, part of the psychedelic end of 60s era, like kind of rock. It's kind of part of the beauty of that. Like if you were to play like with a super distorted tone like I have right now, like this is not fast. Like it's almost like I'm trying to make some heavy metal out of a Hendrix tune, which is like it's too much. So there is a tonal component in rock, especially in rock variations, and going into metal. Like the techniques and the theory behind them are very similar, but there is a lot of stylistic choices in terms of the sound behind those. So what if we talk a little bit about tone and just rock tones, like a little bit of that?
Sure.
Let's diving into tone.
So yeah, actually we made a class on that very recently. I don't know if that was streamed to YouTube. I'll look for it in case I find it. But we basically, and it was the two of us, we talked a lot about what to do over here, what kind of options or impossibilities we have on what our guitars offer. So right off the bat, the first thing I want to mention is the volume knobs. On this particular guitar, it's very interesting because it has 3 pickups, one knob specifically for each one. So that's why you have seen me today, like grabbing these knobs and playing around with the distortion. I always think of distortion as an engine from a car. So gain is like revving the engine pretty hard. So this is all of the knobs all the way up. Versus taking them down, this is close to 0. Can you see how it's not as dirty as this? So there's a huge control that we have over here on the knobs, as well as the tone knob. That's the tone knob all the way down. It's almost clean right now. Versus open. It changes your tone a lot. So I would play around with these knobs, also with the strength on your hand. I play around with that a lot on my solos, for instance. Let's say... Right, I played with my dynamics, I played some notes a little quieter, and then I tried to highlight some of them, so I played them stronger. So dynamics play a huge role as well. And look, I haven't touched the amp. It's all here with the knobs and with the strength on my hand. So that's my first thought. What about you, Manu?
All great elements. Volume now, just recapping on that. Again, it cleans up when you're. And I'm thinking more about like specific rock/metal rhythm applications. Anytime you need to clean up your tone, the volume knob will do that. Now, when you put distortion on an amplifier, like if you think about what happens in the signal chain when you go into an amp, essentially you're lowering the volume of the guitar coming into the amp, and for that. If you're using a clean channel on an amp, you're gonna get less volume. But if you're distorted, instead of being lower volume, it will stay at the same volume, but it will decrease the amount of overdrive or distortion that you're getting. If I'm going full volume, I have a lot of distortion here. I back it off. The volume is still the same. It's still loud. It's less dirty, which is good for like. If I want to play something like Van Halen-ish with like arpeggios, some triads, double stops in there, maybe I would like to drop a little bit of that messy distortion in there, because like the more distortion you have, and this is kind of a fine line, you have to find whatever works for your tone the best, but there's a fine line between a good amount of distortion and way too much distortion. And now I'm more of a metalhead, so my threshold for distortion is higher than normal. But still, you want to get definition out of the notes. What happens is there's a sweet spot, and if you have too low gain, you don't get enough oomph from your tone. If your distortion is low, if you get too much distortion, you start to lose this definition, and everything becomes a mess, right? So you want to reach that middle ground on which you get you get that muted definition, like with attack. So there is still attack difference between the quiet and the loud notes. So you can get that distance between those two. But it also, you can play a chord and you can still hear each one of those strings go out, even with a lot of distortion. For me, that's the sweet spot. And from there, you can tweak less or more depending on how you like. But if you find that sweet spot, your tone is going to be so much better. And that sweet spot is usually less distortion than you may think. They say, oh yeah, I need more power equals more distortion, but it's not usually like that. And for that, I don't have much more advice other than you need to experiment with your gear and your guitar, because this one, for example, this guitar has very high output pickups. So this setup is going to be different to a Strat, for example, has lower output. So there is a number of things in the way that could change your tone, which is like your setup may be different than mine. So those are things to take into account. Nevertheless, try to hit the sweet spot of distortion, and I guarantee your tone will be so much better.
Yep, also play around with your tone knob. I just noticed from what Manu was playing, when the volume was all the way up, it was easier to hear the attack on the pick. So that's something you might or not want, depending on the context. If it's very heavy metal from the 80s, you might want that attack on the pick. Let's try it out.
Too much distortion, also depending on the pick material, this is important for rhythm. The pick material, if it's too... it happens with nylon picks. It's very noisy. But yeah, what one was saying, like, less gain, kind of a more sweet, more mellow lower gain, higher gain. You get a lot of that, right?
Yep, you get a lot of this. Sorry, this is down. But this sound, just the attack on the strings, not the notes themselves.
Yeah.
Like this is tone down versus tone up. It feels a little more aggressive and brighter if your tone knob is up. So that's
Right.
something also to play around with.
Right.
Yeah. Also play with your gain setting. Right now we have used pretty high gain sounds for all of the lesson, but we could try around with how much or little gain we might want. For instance, I'll go in a second to show that. It's just that my amp is right here, so I need to turn around to change the setting. But so far we have covered a lot of metal, a lot of palm muting, and a lot of power chords. But maybe if I were to play blues, it depends obviously on what kind of blues am I taking a little bit. At least the one I usually play is like jazzier blues, so I might not want a very distorted tone. So I would take it down over there or over here. I'll show that in a second, but yeah, look, it's different to play a 12-bar blues doing this versus taking it down. That's still too dirty for my taste. I would try to tweak it a little bit. A little better over here. Versus playing the same things but very, very distorted. I mean, it sounds good, but I just think it might be too much for the context. So I would play around with the gain knob in a second. I'll just turn around and change it. In the meantime, Manu, do you have anything to add there to like that gain setting?
Yes, I have a lot to add actually. No, it's okay. You can go and tweak that.
No, go ahead while I tweak it.
No, okay. So here's the thing: you can do a lot with dynamics in your right hand and volume knobs, but you can only do so much. Right. So, for example, in Juan's example, he was rolling his volume all the way down to get like a low gain tone. The problem is that now you have a very weak guitar signal, and it's kind of degraded. It's gonna sound very dark, and you will not have much wiggle room because your amp is gonna be increasing that low volume, that low gain a lot, and you're gonna end up with kind of a squash signal, right? So at that point, you may want to look into a different preset if you're using a pedal board, or tweaking your amp if you're using a real amp. So what I do in my case, Juan has an amp, I have a plugin, which is like I have a pedal board. Doesn't matter which one it is, it's just it's all the same. What I do is I have one preset for blues, one preset for rock, and one preset for metal. Because honestly, I cannot get a good sound for the three things on one preset. So I have to set up my tones differently. So I have my clean and slightly broken up blues tone, my mid gain tone, which is the one that you're listening right now for kind of rock stuff, and then I have a very nasty heavy metal tone for my heaviest needs. But there's only so much you can do with dynamics and your guitar. At some point, you need to tweak further into getting your dream tone.
Yep, look, I just found a perfect tone for me for that blues vibe I was talking about.
Yeah.
Right? If I play hard, it still gives me that crunchy tone. But I needed to tweak it there. It's very different the tone I was getting when I turned my volume knobs down versus just tweaking that gain setting down. But look, this might be too soft for that. I'm still playing the same over here, but it sounds like this, like very thin, because the gain is lower. So explore that depending on the context you're playing at. This might be good for blues, or for example, for playing this better. Much better. Yep, so gain is also huge, and it depends a lot on the context. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, always keep in mind that what distortion does ultimately is squash your tone. It amplifies your guitar signal a lot and then squashes it, compresses it, over compresses it, and distorts it. So what happens is you lose dynamics. That's the whole deal about the amount of distortion, is you're messing with the dynamics of the guitar. With a completely clean guitar tone, you have the maximum dynamics, which means you can go, and let me show you, you can go from very, very squeaky clean kind of tones, which can maybe breaking up a little bit if you push it, right? But that's like zero distortion. It's like you have all the headroom in the world. As you start piling up on distortion, if I step on a pedal here, I can still go clean, but I cannot go absolutely clean anymore. Now, my distortion pedal is kind of like bringing up even the noise. You can hear the noise from the guitar. I'm bringing up that floor. Like, I cannot play super, super quiet now. The minimum volume I can play is this. I cannot go below that. Now, my super loud spanks are also quieter. So essentially what I'm doing when I'm placing distortion is I'm doing this to the dynamic range. I'm squashing everything, which means the quiet gets louder and the louder gets quieter. So everything gets smushed together, which could be something that you're looking for or something that you're not looking for. This is 100% subjective, right? And depends on the style and the music that you play, right?
Yep. I personally use that on my advantage when I'm improvising. I start at a very low volume setting on my guitar. That way I have room to maybe grow my solo. So in case I need to really take the dynamics up, since I can't really make them so obvious because of the dynamic range going a little bit narrower or more narrow, I take a hold of that and just start a little bit quieter, and then I open up my volume for the distortion to shine out a little bit later on my solos. That's a creative tool I use for just playing my improvisations and playing with dynamics. So yeah, that's something we could play around with. Let me just show that real quick. This is my almost clean tone. Let's say that I want to grow this. So I just took my volume knobs up. It was not so drastic of a difference because my gain setting is lower over there. But if I cranked it up a little bit, I would have a little bit more of space to play around with that contrast. So that's something we can play around as well when improvising. Again, I think the main thing is context. So it depends on what you're playing. If you're playing like a very heavy metal song, well, our gain is gonna be very up, and we don't need to worry too much about dynamics because the whole song in that context, it probably is very loud. But if you're playing maybe Foo Fighters, they play a lot with the dynamics on their songs, so it could be a thing to consider there. Also, yeah, presets. If you have a digital piece of gear that allows you to save different presets, it would be cool to have maybe one for blues, one for metal, one for alternative rock. Play around with your settings. Maybe it even has different options on distortions, because it's different to play with a fuzz than it is to play with an overdrive, than it is to play with the distortion of an orange amp versus the distortion of a Mesa Boogie. So yeah, a gear also has like its own print to the sound you're using. So play around with the options that you have. But yeah, if you don't have a wide variety of options, just play around with gain, okay? With how much or little gain are you getting. And also, again, just experiment a lot. I think gear and tone knowledge is a lot of just trying whatever you can with the tools that you have in front of you. So really explore what can you get if you tweak this knob that way or in the middle, and you'll gain a lot of knowledge there. So yeah, that's my little take on that.
Great
Awesome.
point.
Do you have anything else you would like to talk over here, Manuel?
No, not really. I think we covered everything that that was on my head, at least. Just it's good technique goes a long way for rhythm. Start like good timing, specifically good timing good right hand technique, good muting, and with distortion, if you ever play live or in a rehearsal setting at the high volumes, if you don't mute like all that open string noise, if you play a note and then you don't mute properly, that becomes very messy if you try to play with hard distorted tones. So just keep that in mind. You want to keep your strings under control in that case. For those of you wanting to play more extreme kind of metal genres, get a noise gate and get an overdrive pedal. The noise gate, what it does is that it chops off your signal at a certain threshold. So if you're trying to play like, you can play, and when it drops below a certain volume, it will immediately chop it off. So there is no sustain, there is no reverb, there is no anything. You see that? It goes off. That's my rhythm tone, and I set it up so I play when I mute. It's like whoop, it disappears. The guitar disappears. Again, part of a stylistic choice of metal is like all or nothing, and especially modern productions are very edited to sound like this. So you want to get kind of this live tone as much as you can. And the other thing before we wrap it up is for the attack. We mentioned the attack of the pick. Some amps are very friendly. Sometimes some amps are not really friendly, or some guitars are not very friendly with this. Some setups sound more or less saturated, and what that means is it's kind of like a spike in the tone when you do a pick attack, and you get this kind of attack of the pick. Some amps don't do that. So if you like this kind of like very in the face kind of rhythm tone, not every piece of gear gets you there. So of course there's a lot you can do with technique and good muting and picking and everything. But if you're playing on a small Marshall combo amp or something like that, it's gonna be hard to get the kind of tone. So overdrive sometimes helps a little bit with that, and some pedals are specifically designed for enhancing the attack of your tone. But Tube Screamer is one of the greatest examples of that. Most of the like productions these days use some kind of overdrive based on the Tube Screamer just to get some extra attack on tone. It essentially cuts your low end of the guitar, and you can sculpt your tone a little bit to get like kind of like super tight tone. Right? That's part of the recipe as well. I am a gear nerd, if you haven't noticed yet.
Yeah, just expanding a little bit on that, I was just thinking of a couple of examples that could be useful for practicing that kind of very dry tone. Here's one, Walk by Pantera. Right, I'm muting this note. As you can see, I turned my reverb off, so it goes away immediately. Right, so that's huge on that riff. To be able to mute, work on your muting. That's one idea for that. Another one I have, coming back to that discussion we had initially on palm muting. Here's a cool riff to learn. Wasted Years by Iron Maiden. I'm gonna take this down just a second. So I'm opening up on the notes I fret and muting on the notes that are open high E. This is played faster. I can't at the moment, but
you can.
It's faster, right? But yeah, that's a cool one to work on, that transition from muting to open strings. Yeah, some ideas I had. For this instance, I would use reverb over there. I think for lead parts, it's, at least on my own taste, it's way better to have reverb or delays. And for rhythms, it's better to have a dry sound for this kind of music. Yep. Yeah. That's
Finally, like if you're into heavier rhythms, learn to gallop with the guitar. Right, so. You're gonna hear that in the Trooper. So single note, down, 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 down. So big part of the genre, and it really trains like it really trains your right hand technique. And a slower song to practice this is Europe's The Final Countdown. It's a slower version of the same rhythm. Super fun to play. Have some fun. Play some music.
Yep, check this riff out before we go. This is Circles by Incubus, coming back to that dry tone. Something like that. So yeah, that muting is crucial for this kind of music as well. With that in mind, guys, thank you very, very much for your time, for your attention. Thanks for the questions on the chat. Look, we made a whole conversation on chords, so participating is always very fun, and we all learn new stuff. With that in mind, guys, I just wanted to invite you one last time to apply or consider applying to the Guitar Zoom Academy, the best place to be if you want to take your guitar playing to the next level. We will be very, very glad to talk with you. Yeah, the details are right there, but we will be very happy to receive you. And yeah, with that in mind, guys.
Link in the description for YouTube, guys.
Yep, just left it on the chat as well. And
Perfect.
see you around on the next class that we're doing this week. That's gonna be on Thursday. Okay, so that's Friday for Colin, but for the rest of us at this side of the world, it's gonna be Thursday. So see you around over there, guys. Thank you. Hope you have a good one. And thank you, Manu, for the tips as well. That was pretty cool.
Thank you, Juan. Great time as usual.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.